Okay, good evening. Our meeting's already open since we had a closed session. I'm going to start off. The superintendent would like to make some initial comments.
Good evening, everyone. Just two brief comments. One regarding strategic planning. Just want to make mention of the upcoming community forum on strategic planning. Our hired consultant, Judy Wilson, will be holding a forum on October 29th, 9:30 to noon, right here in the multipurpose room. She's already held individual and group interviews, created surveys for students, parents, and community members, and this is just another opportunity for community members to participate. Again, that's on October 29th, 9:30, here at the multipurpose room for the board office. Also on November 8th, which is obviously election day, since the presidential election will be held, voting for Dutch Neck as well as for Village Elementary School will be taking place. There were traditional voting spaces will be in this particular room. As a result of that, we cannot hold our board meeting here, so we'll be back across the street at Grover Middle School, where we've been in the past. So again, for the meeting on November 8th, we will be at Grover Middle School in the cafeteria. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The student representatives' comments?
Hello? Okay.
Now it works.
Student Council's Homecoming Week was very successful this year, with the dance bringing in a great revenue. This year, instead of a decorator for the dance, we used our money on a flip bookmaker. So a large green screen was set up, and a photographer shot a 7-second video of the subjects and then converted the video into a frame-by-frame book free for any student at the dance. And then after a large surplus of money made from the homecoming dance and South merchandise sales, Student Council is now trying to figure out how the money should be spent, whether it be a new water bottle filler, another event, or even a healthy snack vending machine. Our annual Pink Out football game was this Friday, October 7th, and our cheerleaders sold Pink Out t-shirts all week long for $10, and all proceeds went towards breast cancer research. And our varsity football team actually won its first game in 2 years, 29-28 against Hamilton West. And then we also won again the next week against Princeton, 40-18. So
Ready to face Rutgers
42-18.
now.
Yeah, and South Cross Country girls just finished an undefeated season this evening, beating Princeton. And volleyball's annual Serve Up Hope game will be next Thursday. All of this week, we're selling Serve Up for Hope t-shirts during lunch, and all of the money will go towards Alzheimer's research. And then lastly, this year, a few members of South's African American community collaborated and made a new club called South's Black Student Union. Some of its members held a blackout during American Day of Spirit Week, wearing all black to voice their support of the Black Lives Matter movement. The club is now collaborating with the Hispanic Club to make joint events.
Thank you.
Everyone. I don't have as detailed a report on North sports. However, I do know as a fact all of our teams are at least doing decently. I believe our football team just won our last game against, I want to say Hamilton as well. And I know we also won our game against Princeton. Just as at South, the homecoming whole weekend was a great success. The homecoming game made great profits for the junior class council. The homecoming dance made great profit for the entire student council as a whole. And at this point of the year, most students have become acclimated to their classes. They more or less know the expectations of their teachers and are slowly becoming more, like I said, acclimated into what they are expected to do in each of their classes. I'm on the fencing team this year, and our winter preseason has started. We, just like a lot of other teams, ice hockey started. I think swimming's to start soon. So preparation for even winter sports has begun. There will be our band, orchestra, and choir concert this coming Wednesday, the next Wednesday, in the North Auditorium. And we've top off our first marking period November 9th, the day after Election Day, and the day after our third meeting here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the special hearing, state testing report. Mr. Smith?
Good evening. It's my pleasure to be able to present the annual testing report. You may or may not remember that last year this was presented in the month of January. The reason why it was delayed last year is because it was the first year that we were reporting results on Park, and the Park results didn't come back until December last year. But now that we have an earlier receiving the results from the Park exam, we now are able to report out on the different assessments. So this evening I will be reporting on the Park exam results for the district, on the SAT results for the district, and the advanced placement results for the district. The Park exam is administered in both language arts and mathematics. First, we're going to take a look at the results for language arts. If we take a look at 3rd through 8th grade, what we have here is those students who have scored a 4 or a 5, and a 4 and a 5 are considered to be college and career ready, or in essence having passed the exam. So if we take a look at this, the blue bars in each of the grades represent the percent of students who have scored proficient, advanced proficient, 4 or 5 on each of these exams. What we can notice is that fundamentally in every single grade level, the students have outscored the state average, which is the red bar, by about 30% points, and the state by about 40%. And that's consistent every single grade level, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade across the board. This next slide then shows a comparison between the results, so we can start to track longitudinally the information of how students are scoring over time. Fundamentally, what we can note we have here is the 2015 results, which are in blue, with the 2016 results, which are in red. And again, we can see there's not really a statistically significant difference between the results. Some of them maybe 1 or 2 percentage points higher, some of them 1 or 2 percentage points lower, some of them almost even in terms of those, but basically no statistically significant difference. So the performance of students in 3rd through 8th grade from the first year of administration basically matches the second year of administration in terms of that. When we get to the high school, the results are a little bit more interesting, and I think we need to take a little bit more look at the results at the high school. We notice that 9th grade fundamentally mirrors what's happening in 3rd through 8th grade, again, where the students, the district students are performing at about 30 to 40% higher than both the state and the Park Consortium, but that starts to narrow a little bit in 10th grade and then narrow significantly when we get to 11th grade. There are a couple of things to keep in mind with that. The first thing that we need to keep in mind is that the number of opt-outs at the high school last year were certainly much higher than we had seen in the previous year in terms of that. And we also know that the Park exams that were administered at the high school did not count in any way as a high school graduation requirement. And the great majority of students knew that they had already met their high school graduation requirement because we administer the PSAT exams in the fall, and you're able to use the PSAT exam score results in order to meet your graduation requirements. So the seriousness with which students take this exam maybe is not quite the same as we're seeing at the 3rd through the 9th grade level. There's one other thing that we really do need to take a look at, and that is the 11th grade results. And we can see here where it shows up even more pronounced that there was actually a significant decrease in the 11th grade from the 2015 results to the 2016 results, whereas the 9th grade actually saw an increase from 69% of students to 81% of students scoring a 4 or 5, and the 10th grade about the same, 60 to 62. But we see in the 11th grade that we've gone from 72% of students who received a score of 4 or 5 down to 45%. The reason for this is that the state changed who had to take the Park exam in 2015 versus 2016. In 2015, all students were in 11th grade were supposed to have taken the Park exam. But last year, any student who was enrolled in an advanced placement English course in their junior year was exempt from taking the Park exam. So every single student In essence, the students who are probably the highest performing students because they're enrolled in an advanced placement course was automatically exempt from having to take. We had almost 250 students who were enrolled in advanced placement between High School North and High School South last year. So those students automatically were pulled out of the population who took them. So while it looks as if there was a significant decrease in the numbers of students who were able to pass the exam in 11th grade, actually it's artificially deflated as a direct result of the state changing who was required to take that exam. Next, what we're going to take a look at is the mathematics. Notice it's 3rd through 7th grade, and the reason why it's not 3rd through 8th grade as it was with language arts is because the majority of our students in 8th grade are taking Algebra 1, so that will be on a separate slide because that's end of course as opposed to sort of end of grade. So in 3rd through 7th grade, pretty much the same types of results that we saw in the English language arts exam. Our students tend to score above the state average by about 30 some odd percent and above the Park Consortium by about 40 some odd percent there. So it's very similar in 3rd through 7th grade in our mathematics. Again, just like in language arts, when we compare the results of 2015 to the results of 2016, there's not really a statistically significant difference there. Pretty much the same. I mean, yes, the 5th grade, 72 to 78, a little bit larger, 6th grade, 74 to 80%, but fundamentally within the same range, a little bit better in terms of the performance, but I wouldn't call it tremendous gains in terms of that. Pretty steady in terms of the performance over those years. Then, at the next slide, notice it says students in 7th through 11th grade, because we have one group of students who take Algebra 1 starting in 7th grade, the majority of students who take it in 8th grade, and then therefore the students who take Algebra 1, Algebra 2, or geometry are really spread out from 7th grade to 11th grade. So it's no longer tied to an individual grade as it is in 3rd through 7th or as language arts is in every single grade. In mathematics, it becomes end of course assessments. So again, we see the exact same types of performance, basically about 30% higher than the state average, about 40% higher than the Park average of the students who are achieving proficiency on those exams and demonstrating that they're college and career ready. Again, if we take a look at a comparison between 2015 and 2016, we will notice that they're slightly higher. The math performance last year was slightly higher than the year before. Again, I wouldn't say statistically significant difference, but there is a bit of an increase in terms of the performance on the Algebra 1, the Algebra 2, and the geometry tests that the students took last year. So those are our Park results. The next two sets of exams that we're going to take a look at are the SATs and then the APs. These are tests that are administered to high school students, typically juniors and seniors, and it does allow us to provide national comparative data that we can take a look at. The first is the SAT writing scores, and what we do have, and know that this data is the last year that we'll have this because the SAT has been redesigned also. So now we will no longer be able to have longitudinal data. We'll have to start a new baseline moving forward. But this last year was the last administration of the previous design of the SAT. So we can see a 6-year comparison here, and fundamentally the performance of the district has remained the same across those times. So in terms of the purple line that's up there, that's the state of New Jersey. So we can see that North, South have typically performed significantly above the state average, where the state average tends to be around 500. The district average is around 600, 602, 614, depends upon the year, but basically right in that area. And what you'll notice, I think, to me really clearly, is that there's no statistically significant difference between the performance of North students and the performance of South students. They're fundamentally the same in terms of that, and they're all in line with district factor groups, other high-performing school districts. The same thing for critical reading. I know it says reading and the previous one said writing, but it looks exactly the same because, again, the students perform at a very high level, and that has been consistent performance over the past 6 years. We've seen our students significantly outperform the state average, and, again, no statistically significant difference between students at South or at North. And then the last one, in terms of the SAT, is the mathematics performance. And again, I know it changes it to mathematics, but it looks fundamentally as if it's the same because, again, the student's performance is consistently high, outperforming by about 100 points the average within the state, but again, not showing any difference between North students and South students in terms of those. So those are the SAT, and again, as I point out, we've been fortunate to be able to have longitudinal data to be able to see whether or not there's been any shift in performance over time, and we can see that there fundamentally has not been. Next year, just as last year we had to reset the point with Park being a first-year baseline, we'll have to reset the baseline next year with the redesigned SAT because it will not be comparative information with the redesign. And then the last slide that I have here has to do with the AP results and a summary of those. Last year, let me take a look at the specifics. If we take a look here, we had a total of 1,213 total grades reported at South and 1,066 reported at North. Now that may look, if you followed this data over a couple of years, for a couple of years North actually had a higher number of grades reported or exams administered than South did, so it looks like North went down a little bit, but that's not the case because the numbers of juniors and seniors class dropped by about 150 students last year. So while, yes, the exams came down, it's because the number of students who were eligible to take those classes also went down. So when we look at the percentages, we're not going to see a difference in terms of the performance there. Fundamentally, we noticed that the majority of students are getting 5s on these exams. Next, with the students in terms of getting 4s, then 3s, and only 8% of the students were getting a 1 or a 2. So basically that says that 92% of the students are receiving a passing grade, with the majority of those receiving a 4 or 5, which are the grades that the most selective colleges would tend to accept if they do. And we know there's some highly, highly selective colleges that don't even accept those. That it just is really an individual case in terms of that. But fundamentally, we continue to see very strong performance by the students in the AP. So questions?
I just was curious in seeing the results of how our students perform on the AP tests, and 92% score 3 or 4 or 5. Can you tell us nationally how students perform on these tests?
I could get the specific numbers, but I know that it's nowhere near that number of students. It's usually probably about 20% of students who score in the 1 range. It's about 25% of students who are scoring in the 2 range. So fundamentally, we're talking about 55% of students scoring in the 3 or above. One thing is that information, and actually if you just Google 2016 AP results, anybody can get those for a cost, but they're divided down by course because there are differences depending upon the course, whereas we tend not to have great differences in terms of how students perform depending in general across the board. Every AP course that we offer, students tend to score more 5s than they do 4s. The majority of students score 4s and 5s, and the next 3s, with very small percentage of students scoring a 1 or 2. But nationally, there's greater variation in terms of depending upon the exam. There are some exams where actually 1s and 2s are much higher than, let's say, the 45% or so. It might even be 50 or 60%, so it just depends.
Yeah, just quickly, it would be nice to see the longitudinal as well, 2015 and 16, 15 and everything, comparison
So,
is on par.
I certainly could create that slide. What I can tell you is that the percentage of students who are scoring at the 3 or higher has been 92 to 93% for the last 5 years, at least since I've been here. So that I do know. There hasn't been any statistically significant change in terms of the percentage of students who are scoring at that level.
So I have a question about the Park Language Arts Literacy for grades 9 to 11.
Mm-hmm.
You say there were a lot of opt-outs, especially at grade 11 this year. What was the participation rate at grade 9, and what was the participation rate at grade 11?
I don't have the specific numbers, but I do know that the numbers of students who opted out were larger at the high school. So we saw a couple hundred students who opted out across the high schools, as opposed to at the early elementaries, we're talking about a handful of students. So in the 3rd through 5th grade, it was literally probably 10 to 20 students. In the middle school, it got a little bit larger, 30 to 50 students. At the high school, it did get larger than that. But the even larger than the opt-out is the 11th grade students who did not have to take the exam because they were taking an advanced placement exam. So when you combine that with both the students who did not take the exam because of opting out of the exam, and along with the students who were exempt from taking it because of the AP, that's where we really saw a depression in the number of students who took that exam.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a gauge as far as, the 45% that scored level 4 or 5 in grade 11. What percentage of our grade 11 students does that 45% represent? So
I could go back and get that information
I'd
for you. I don't
appreciate
have
that.
that.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you go to that AP exams?
Sure.
Yeah, do we have the stats? Do we have the stats for which course is the most popular exam? And how many, what's the average number of AP courses a student takes?
Well, I actually don't have the specifics in terms of the exact numbers that AP courses. We could get that information for you. We know that, a certain chunk of students, probably the majority of students, take 1 to 2 courses, but then you'll see there are some students who take 3. There are then, less students, but some students who take 4. There are some students who take 5. And as you go to higher numbers of courses, it's, of course, less and less students who are doing that. The other thing that you have to watch out for is we do allow students to take exams, AP exams, for courses that they have not actually taken.
Yeah.
So it may be that a student, for example, takes 5 AP exams, but is actually enrolled in just 3 AP courses, but for whatever reason feels prepared and takes. You see that in language. So, for example, we have students who take Japanese, or we might have students which we do not offer, but we'll have some students who will take that exam. So there are always some students, or for example, in the past, we always had quite a few students who took the AP psychology exam, but yet we did not offer AP psychology until this year. Now this year we know we'll see significant increase in the number of students, because when we weren't offering the class, we had probably 100 students who were taking the AP Psych exam. Now that we're offering it, we have 11 sections of the course, 6 at one high school, 5 at the other, so we're going to see a significantly increase. We also know, I take a look at not just the numbers of, what the distribution is, but what's the percentage of students who are enrolled in the class who then go on to take the exam. And we know that fundamentally across all classes, it's 85+% of students who are enrolled in the class who end up sitting for the exam. So the majority of students who take an AP course sit to take the exam. So it's not as if, we have really, really great numbers, but the reason why is we're not having the students whom we wouldn't think would perform well not taking the exam. The great majority of students who take the course sit for the exam.
Okay, thanks. And also, do you have the breakdown of the number of students by the grades, like freshman, sophomore, and junior?
I don't on this, although we know the great majority of these students are juniors and seniors. The great majority of 90+% of these
seniors,
students.
I thought seniors would be graduating by May, because most of the exams are offered at May, right?
Right, but the students take the exams. Most AP students take exams in junior year or senior year. Some in sophomore, a few as freshmen, but the great majority of students are doing this as juniors and seniors.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Now we get to the special hearing on violence and vandalism and HIB. I think Mr. Dalton is going to give us that presentation.
Good evening, Board. You may remember that each spring, Mr. McDonald joins us, our Director of Guidance, to report on the numbers of HIB cases that we have in the district, with some historical data on that. I'll touch a little bit on the HIB numbers, but a big part of tonight's presentation also involves our annual report on violence and vandalism reporting. It's an electronic system where we enter data from all of our schools where we have issues of violence and vandalism in our schools, but also where we report out on 2 requirements that all schools in New Jersey must adhere to during the month of October. In the first week of October, all schools must report to the state of New Jersey and through our report to you at the board what we have done in our schools for the week of respect. And then also in the 3rd week of October, we also have to provide activities for our students on school violence awareness and also must report that out as well. All of these things are the things that I like to say, even though we're reporting out on them in October, they're things that we're concentrating on in our schools all year long. To build a positive climate and culture in our schools. So as you may recall, each year when we've had Mr. McDonald, we look at our mission statement around HIB and the idea that we are committed to providing a respectful community for all of our students. This year, we with our administrative faculty and our HIB specialists also had Mark Toscano in from Comegno Law, who provided additional training, because we're watching very closely that there are some proposed changes to the HIB law that have not come through yet but may be coming soon. So we wanted to make sure that we had a good baseline with all of the changes that we have had in administrative staff and also with some of our HIB specialists, that everyone was trained in the same manner consistently. So that happened earlier this month. Week of Respect activities happen throughout the schools. I am certainly not going to read all of these to you. You have them on the slides, but I think we should be very proud of our schools for the positive climate that they try to build in their schools. The Week of Respect tends to focus a lot on the school-wide type things, the idea of spirit-based things. And as you look through all of these, starting from Dutch Neck School, going all the way through to our high schools, you can begin to see how morning announcements, themes with color, themes with dress and things like that, help to celebrate that idea of respectful interaction throughout all of our schools. Here's Maurice Hawk School. Then we have Town Center School. You see a lot with themes going throughout the week. If you had the chance to get to some of the schools this week, you may have seen people wearing matching colors as you went through, along with morning announcements and activities in classrooms. Wyckoff School as well. It almost becomes a little bit of a competition amongst our elementary schools here and how much they can fit into their activities. Millstone River School and Village School here on one slide. Here at our middle schools, both of our middle schools share an anti-bullying specialist, so we try to honor the individuality of the schools, but also bring some consistency across the 2 schools. At our high schools, again, we involve the students here, the announcements, but also peer leaders, peer leadership groups representing respectful activities within the schools during that week. You may remember that we reviewed in the spring the definition of HIB, and this is one of those ones we are watching to see if there will be any changes within the state guidelines on this, but we haven't heard of those yet. And then some of the things we have discussed also have been, what are the different types of HIB, and what is the evidence and what is the factual finding? And very often this is one of those things that you really have to read this multiple times to understand. But something could be classified as HIB, but what type of HIB? Or why doesn't it fit HIB? It may not fit HIB because of the identifying characteristics. It may be poor behavior, but it may not fit in that category of HIB. So again, Mr. McDonald provided a whole variety of charts. I'm including this one for this comparison. This is a 3-year comparison for our district that ended in June, so that you can see across, the number of investigations in the blue and the actual confirmed HIB. Again, being that we may have had a behavior concern, we may have had an interaction between students that wasn't respectful, but it may not have met the definition of HIB. Does not mean that there wasn't something that was addressed or dealt with those students. Our investigations have been down, the patterns and trends. We still see pretty much the same types of trends across the board here. Minimally supervised settings. We talked about this last year, and some of you asked questions about this. When we get down closer to the bottom, the online and texting, we still see that as a concern. Within our curriculum, we do have a variety of areas where we talk about, digitally responsible citizens. But I think if we were to combine the minimally supervised settings and online, those are two, I would say, dangerous areas for some of our young people. The cell phone texting, the Snapchats, all of those types of things are where children tend to get themselves into trouble. And they're not happening during school, but maybe happening outside of school, but because of the relationship of the students in school, we are obliged to address that item because the nexus of their relationship starts in school. We do see in those, and you'll see in some other numbers when I get into violence and vandalism, you might end up in some of those cases as well, where it's one case, but 8 children involved, or 10 children involved because of the way the socialization occurs around some of those online types of situations. So within the electronic system with the state of New Jersey, they have very unique ways of reporting things. We have to log into the system and report not just HIB, but we also have to look at the differences with weapons and substance abuse and threats. And you can see year to year these numbers do change. And how they are reported is pretty consistent, but that again, it could be more than one child involved, so the numbers can vary. We did run into a situation this year where I was speaking to Mr. Thomas. It appears that some of the instances that we were definitely aware of at Grover Middle School did not somehow get logged into the state system, and it only became available to us last week to actually go in and review. So we're researching that matter to find out why some of those situations did not get recorded. One we talked about today, and to give you an idea of vandalism, we did have some students or some young people break into our gym at Grover Middle School last year. We're very well aware of that. We believe we did log it, but for some reason it did not come up in the state system. For those of us that have worked in that state system, I would say it would remind you of logging into DOS. It allows you to log in during certain times. And a lot of people around the state log in, you get kicked out, and sometimes you don't know if what you've put in has actually taken. You then need to wait a couple of days to be able to log back in and see if what you put in has even taken. It's a very old system. So we will look into that. We've never really had a lot of costs of vandalism. Ours have typically been a minor breakage or students breaking in, thankfully, usually breaking in to play basketball. In our schools, they seem to like to come back to do that, but we haven't had a lot of damage in that area. Victim information, again here I think we see some duplicate counting when more than one student is involved in a situation, and these are things that we will continue to monitor and monitor year to year. Offender information corresponds with the victim information. If you look, you see we saw the victims under regular education increase significantly, and we also saw the offenders. It would appear that we have some situations where we have multiple students involved in this situation. Last year, some of the board asked for other district comparison. I think Mr. Powell, you had brought that up, or someone on the board had brought that up. So the challenge with the way the state runs the system is we had to log in last week to get our numbers from last year. We can't see yet until probably next week or the week after the numbers across the state. But I was able to pull the comparisons of 2014-15, which we discussed last year, and you asked to see, and so I kind of followed Mr. Shanek's rule of what are some of our typically compared districts. So that you could see, based on enrollment, what are other districts seeing under violence, vandalism, weapons, substances, or HIB. So you can kind of do the comparison there using that chart. On the state website, they have it. It's a PDF. It's listed by county. So you have to, go through about a 15-page document to look at that. But I know that is an important thing to look at. We did review this, and there is some ups and downs, and I think 1 year can change. If you have 1 or 2 events, can really change things based on the number of students involved, or based on maybe multiple situations with a student could definitely skew the numbers a little bit. So then, to kind of end on a more positive, what has our district done around Violence and Vandalism Awareness Week? A lot of what we did here, again, is the school-wide, but it also gets into classroom lessons. In this area, a lot of classroom lessons come up about wise decision-making and things like that. At our elementary level, I always like to remind everyone that we've done a very good job of making sure that responsive classroom is built into our schedule. And we are sticking true to that idea of having good conversations about good decision making from a very early age in our district. So you see that going through the elementary schools, and even incorporating like what are the books that we read aloud to students, and how we report the news out in our schools, in the elementary schools. So all the way through you see that occurring. Lessons are referenced throughout. In the middle schools, again, we actually we have bystander, which, again, this is where I say having it in 1 week. We have actual productions done by students for our students. They may not happen in the exact week it's supposed to happen, but they do happen. We hope that we're being careful about violence and vandalism all year, not just in the 3rd week of October. As well as at our high schools, we had pledges. So we're continuing with working with our counselors and anti-bullying specialists on what we can bring into our schools. Our middle schools and high schools continue to work with the Center for Supportive Schools, with Campaign Connect. Our teams have continued in their work in that area and continue to bring great ideas forward. Our student assistant counselors work with any drug and alcohol prevention programs and students who need counseling in that area. We continue to have assembly programs, some that we bring in, some that our students actually perform in, and some that our PTAs have funded over the years. We continue to have Michael Fallon in at the middle school level. Last year he even came in at the 4-5 level, and talked a lot about stereotypes and things like that. So the character education program continues. The clubs, as we heard some of our report out on some of our high school activities, many of our clubs and organizations are promoting the positive environment for students. So we're continuing to look at we review our code of conduct every summer. As you remember, when we readopt our discipline policy, we do take a look at it every summer. Our assistant principals are very careful and considerate about, are we seeing the code of conduct working for us with our current situations? We continue to implement the mandated harassment, intimidation, and bullying policy and await any further changes there. And we continue to review our district crisis plan and work with everyone to make sure that we're up to date in that area. It's an area that we're focusing on a lot lately. We've been getting a lot of alerts around the state about threats within schools. You may have seen them in the news. We had another one today or yesterday around the state today. And we're very cautious to warn our schools about being on alert. You may see the tweets that go out that we actually do practice evacuations. We were here, we had one today, but also here in Village School, I think it was last week, we evacuated the entire school over to Grover, where we try to prepare for those emergencies. Those threats fall into the idea of the violence and vandalism if anyone is caught in those situations, because you're posing a major threat to the whole school community. So we take that very seriously, and we try to work on the idea of prevention.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
On the number of incidents, it looks like it went up a little bit.
It did.
And I'm just wondering if that's like an anomaly, or was that like that, what were the numbers like in 13, 14? Were they?
I think 14, 15 was the down year. If you look at one of the graphs that showed that 15, 16 was closer to 13, 14.
Yeah.
14, 15 was down.
14, 15 was down. Yeah.
Do we know what the reason might be for?
Nothing
this?
specific. Again, I think, you have trends. I think We see more of it in the middle school and high school. And I would say that we are definitely seeing, the continued issue as I highlighted around the electronic issues, cell phones especially.
So thank you for this. In looking, kind of glancing through some of the materials about how we're educating the students on the idea of HIB and vandalism, it's not clear that what kind of modeling we do. Like, are there videos that we show students that demonstrates what undesirable behavior looks like? I think you said that maybe there were some group of students that went like from classroom to classroom. Can you tell us a little bit more about what kind of modeling we give to the students to train them on this kind of stuff?
Well, the one that was referenced in there, Bystander, is an assembly program that we've been doing for years where students are actually trained to do a play on what it means to be a bystander, and they actually stand up in front of their peers and go on stage and put a play together on what it means to be a bystander and how to stand up and be more of an upstander and speak for what's going wrong. And we've been doing that for a while now, and we've netted great results with it because it's peers performing in front of their peers, not just adults talking to them. I also think in the years, I think for myself, it's been over 15, 16 years that I've watched Michael Fallon come into our schools. For anyone that's had the opportunity to see You Don't Know Me Until You Know Me from Michael Fallon, it's a very powerful thing to, he's a one-man show who goes in and out of character to dispel stereotypes and gets the kids to a point of realizing that they are judging each other, and then talks about why we have to be very careful about how we do judge each other. So we have all of those types of things. But I think when you go down to the elementary level too, it's also a matter of responsive classroom. How do we have productive conversations with each other? How do we express our feelings in an appropriate way and have that guided by an adult? So the students are having those conversations, usually with prompts from the adults.
Okay.
Thank you, Gerard. Actually, one clarification. HIB is clearly defined, and vandalism is self-explanatory. But could you tell us a little bit more about the violence, the scope of it? Give some examples, because that's something not too clear to me.
It's a great question, and for those of us that have been to trainings with the violence and vandalism system, it could also be the trainer and what the trainer says to you. I would say for us, violence, for most schools, violence are the real fights. The unprovoked, it just happens, and it's a pretty violent fight. So for us, it's, I would say, compared to many districts, minimal. We have kids who get into disagreements, but we're not typically breaking up physical fights on a daily basis as you may see in some other districts. So that's what you would typically be talking about. It's a great question, though, because there's a lot of debate when you go to these trainings on what is the level of the fight that you have to get to then report it out. And I've been to different trainings where I've had different definitions of that. So,
even to some extent, you can get very violent verbally.
You could, but that's not the case for this.
Gotcha.
This is actually striking with force and also, maybe causing injury.
Excuse me. Fights between students or fights between student and teachers?
Well, the violence, the violence would be violent if that were the case. I mean, in this case, we're reporting on students. This system is reporting on students.
Okay, thanks.
Okay?
Just a clarification question. You'd mentioned some incidents where you have a number of students. It might be coming out of one incident. How is that reported? Is that reported as one HIB incident, but maybe it's under the offenders, or what reflects the number of students?
Correct.
Or how is that typically
Correct.
reported?
I mean, if you have multiple victims, you have to list each of those victims. If you have multiple perpetrators, for lack of a better term, you would have to list them. But yes, it could be one situation. Also, just a point of clarification, in the violence and vandalism reporting system, and it doesn't show here, you have to get into whether you suspended these children or anything like that. But that doesn't show up in the data that's pulled for the state report.
Okay. All right, that brings us to an opportunity for public comment on the violence, vandalism, and HIB report. There'll be an opportunity for comment on general topics in a minute. But if anybody wants to make a comment on this report, you're welcome. Vice 3. Okay, I'll assume there won't be any. That brings us to a vote to accept the report. Can I have a motion? Louisa and Michelle. Any questions or discussion?
Ms. Ho?
Yes.
Ms. Juliana?
Yes.
Ms. Pruitt?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Wise-Jean?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor-Jean?
Yes.
Ms. Cage?
Yes.
Mr. Fleury?
Yes.
8-0.
Okay, that ends the special hearing on violence and vandalism and HIB. And it brings us to our first opportunity for public comment. The board invites thoughts and reactions on agenda items and items of concern from members of our community. Each participant is asked to give his or her name and address and hold your comments to 3 minutes. Please come to the microphone.
Hello, my name is Brunda Dias is the last name, 19 Saratoga Drive, West Windsor, of course. It's my first time at a board meeting, and I'm here for a couple of observations and suggestions. Firstly, I just want to thank the board. We've been in the district since my son was in 2nd grade. He's in 6th grade at community middle school, and we've been very happy. We've had a very good experience. The teachers have been really wonderful. We've found everybody to be very professional. It was our first time in the district because our children used to be at private school, and very open to partnering with parents. So I would like to thank all of you for making it a great place to have a child get educated. I also want to thank David Adderholt because I've liked the direction in which the district has been going, especially the focus on balance. When you sent out that letter, I think last year, I was very pleased to read it because, so much has been happening. I really appreciate the no homework nights, and I also like the parent university. Although I'm not able to make it to all of them, I like that there are PDFs I can go to on the website. So in light of, educating our children, the whole child, and keeping balance in mind, I would like to suggest that the district have a showing of a recent film titled Screenagers, which I think is, again, going with the whole theme of balance. As the name suggests, it's a wordplay on teenagers and screen, and especially after hearing Mr. Dalton talking about, the cell phone, the texting, the cyberbullying, all of that, I think it would be a great idea. I personally haven't seen it. I'm hoping that if the district screens it, that I will actually get to see it. Many schools in the area have done it, many private schools, but also many public schools in the North Jersey area. In our area, PDS, the Chapin School, the Waldorf School, the Jewish Family Services in Princeton, Hillsborough Public Library. I could go on, but you get the idea. And I think I suggest this because, again, keeping in mind the idea of balance, because from all the people I've heard who've seen it, it really gives us the other side. We all agree technology has benefits, but I think it would be good for us to know the other side of the story to help us along with our journey of balance. For people who would say that, our district has a one-on-one learning initiative, and wouldn't that go against it? What I would say is no, actually, it would help us with our whole idea of balance, and all these schools that have shown it I'm sorry, I'm going over time. All these schools that I've shown it do also have media, so I think it's in all our interest. And if you could guide me who I could take this to, I'd be very happy to take the next steps to do this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter Sierick, 23 Bradford Lane, Plainsboro. So last night I went to the Parent University, actually. My daughter's young, but I started early. I figured I would go check it out. It was pretty good. We got some good insights. So some things I just wanted to share, and I'm not busting chops here because you probably know my position on some of these things, but the first thing the speaker brought up was TGIF, which is Twitter, Google, Instagram, and Facebook. And he said there's a lot of stress in college. We're talking about stress, that kids are connected, but they're not socially connected face to face. So that seems to be a problem with our children. And so just asking, I know we start Chromebooks off very young with our children here, and we might be doing it younger. But just something to think about from a balance standpoint. Are we contributing to those, kids not being able to be sociable faced. It's okay. So anyway, like I said, we're using the Chromebooks. I think there's some good parts of the Chromebook. I think that there's some bad parts. But, just something to think about as we move forward, or is that contributing to these trends? Are we starting our kids too early? It's definitely something stressful that the speakers mentioned. And I know Dr. Adderhold was there last night, some of the board members, so it was good to see you guys there. The other thing they mentioned was a big stress and change was midterms and finals. And I know that was a sore spot last year, sore point. And they said that one of the biggest changes for kids is that they're being graded on their midterms and finals. That's pretty much their full grade. And we've taken, nobody said anything last night, but we've taken away midterms and finals. And I'm just wondering, would you reconsider your position, being that in colleges, it's very stressful for kids coming there and taking midterms and finals, and we're taking them away now. So are we putting our kids at a disadvantage? Are we causing them more unnecessary stress because they're not prepared now? We used to have midterms and finals, but now they're going to school, now they're going to college, which is already stressful for average kids, and now they're not used to taking midterms and finals. So it's just something to think about. My last suggestion, I brought this up some time ago, but I think parents want to hear answers sometimes, but I understand that we can't answer everybody's questions. We'd be here all night. So I'm still proposing that we have a question box where when parents come in, everyone can put a question, and you guys can randomly pick 3 or 4 questions a night. I think it's fair if everyone could just put some questions, because it'd be nice if we could get some answers. I understand we can't answer all of them, but have a box and just pick 3 or 4 of them randomly, and I think everyone will be happy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You want to put that in the holder, or is it? Oh, okay.
Veronica Mina, 41 Galston Drive. I wanted to address the opera situation. I've been going back and forth with Ms. Hutner, and I did ask her regarding the document that Ms. Kaish was talking about in our last BOE meeting. And there are 2 things that I wanted to bring up. The first one is that I am a little bit confused of why our opera requests, they need to go to legal, because according to the letter that Councillor Harrison wrote, he says, Open Public Records Act requires that public entities provide access to documents defined as public records. It does not require that a public entity engage in research or create a record which does not already exist. Therefore, why does it have to go to legal counsel? If the record already exists, it's there. It doesn't need to go to legal counsel. For example, when I requested the invoices for technology, I am really confused why those invoices had to go to legal counsel. Then the other thing is all this, the document that Ms. Kaish put together. It says attorney review, yes, no. It doesn't give procedures, it doesn't give guidelines, it doesn't give best practices. I don't know who's responsible in sending them. It doesn't give any type of information. Now, the most dumbfounding thing that I found was when I asked Ms. Hutner, no, I want the cost, because Ms. Kaish said that they were costs. Ms. Hutner on October 11th said that document does not exist. However, apparently the administration and facility committees got together on October 10th, and the first thing that I read is opera request discussion. The committee continued to review the number of opera requests, and as of Friday, October 7th, 2016, there were 51 requests. As those 15 required attorney review, legal bills for the month of July total 288. So I am confused if obviously the committee by October 7th knew that, and when I sent the request on October 10th, I asked, give me the cost. How come that was not given to me via an opera request? I am very confused why not the transparency, what that was not given to me. I did the opera request as Ms. Kaish said that I had to do. I mean, I am very dumbfounded why the secrecy. That really doesn't sit well with me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Catherine Foley, 29 Hawthorne Drive. Last summer, I decided to abandon my campaign's election season tradition of addressing issues such as illegal sign placement and campaign finance. But over the weekend, as signs started popping up everywhere and indiscriminately all over West Windsor, I decided not to hold back, and I'm going to share a few thoughts. By Monday, I was feeling very much like the Dr. Seuss character, the Grinch who stole Christmas, the difference being that I don't hate Christmas, I really hate Board of Elections season. I hate elections, I hate everything about them, and particularly the evolving nature of the Board of Election seasons over the last 4 years. Before 2013, as I recall, I don't think that there were election signs for BOE candidates. Now, hundreds of school board political signs litter our community, and thousands of expensive, glossy, color cardstock mailings and palm cards find their way into mailboxes and onto windshields. To me, the distribution of these materials represents thousands of dollars worth of anonymous campaign donations, and in some cases, a disregard for signage codes and the violation of New Jersey election law for distributing materials. It was very tempting for me to become the Grinch who stole the election signs. It would have been very cathartic to go around town and gather them up and put them in a big bag. Instead, though, I started visiting businesses along 571 and by the train station where there were signs placed in front. And what I discovered is that in almost every case, it was almost impossible to get in touch with the commercial building owner. I still have calls out to management agencies who have not called me back. My thought is, if a candidate doesn't have enough supporters willing to place all of the signs legally, the candidate should either recruit more supporters or purchase fewer signs. Some candidates in the past have blamed their campaign volunteers. I feel that these candidates should demonstrate true leadership, take responsibility for the integrity of their campaigns, and correct mistakes when necessary. Do we really want our children to believe that it's okay to ignore laws that might be a little bit difficult to follow? I should mention that I took my concern to the West Windsor Township Council last night and asked them to send notification to all the West Windsor candidates so they would know what the sign codes are and know what the penalties are, which are substantial, potentially substantial. The council president called today and assured me the clerk's office will be contacting those candidates. Wasn't able to reach the Plainsboro zoning officer in charge of this until this evening, but I will forward those codes to the Plainsboro candidates by tomorrow. What all this basically boils down to is that we need fair play on Election Day. It's time to level the playing field so the rule followers aren't put at a disadvantage because the law breakers are skirting the rules. Cheaters really just shouldn't win. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thesa Friedman for Woodland Court in West Windsor. It's a pleasure to be here again tonight. I just want to say that it has been an amazing start to the new school year. I've been in several buildings. I spend a lot of time in the buildings just because I'm very involved. And the nature of the emotion and what's going on in the buildings is very, very positive. The teachers on back-to-school nights were incredibly engaged. The administration in the schools were excited about what's going on this year. Things have been wonderful. Things at South are fantastic. Back-to-school night, Mr. Leppold said it's the best one he's had in years, maybe ever, the smoothest. The number of clubs, there was a club meeting, where they were presenting all the different clubs the other day. My daughter said it was so busy, there were so many tables, she even had a hard time getting close to any of the tables. So it's very exciting as a parent here in the district to see that things are on a positive note again. People are where they need to be in their heads, in the schools. The kids are excited. I've spent, as I mentioned, an enormous amount of time in the schools in the past few weeks, and it's good to see the kids where they are and the teachers where they are. So I just want to thank you for getting us off to a great start, for all the work you do, for all the time you spend. It's incredibly important to us, and while you don't hear it enough, there's enormous numbers of us that are tremendously important and tremendously thankful for everything that you do, and I just want to reiterate that. So keep on keeping on.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, that brings us to committee reports. We'll start with Administration and Facilities.
The Administration and Facilities Committee met on Monday, October 10th. We began our meeting discussing the submission of the CUSAC Statement of Assurance for 2016-17. As I'm sure the other committees will report tonight as well, we reviewed the self-assessment monitoring process that's required for the district this year. Next, we continued our review of the increase in the number of OPA requests that the district has received this school year. As of Friday, October 7th, we had 51 requests, and the committee will continue to review the data at future meetings. We had a preliminary discussion about the 2018-19 school calendar, and we'll continue that conversation at our next meeting as well. Gerard Dalton and David Outerhold discussed the continued monitoring of potential housing developments in West Windsor. To ensure that we remain informed, the committee recommends that the board liaison positions to the planning boards in both West Windsor and Plainsboro, those openings be filled. There are two policies on the agenda for first reading tonight. We reviewed policy 2417, which is student intervention and referral services, and then we also reviewed policy and regulation 2481, which is home or out-of-school instruction for a general education student for reasons other than a temporary or chronic health condition. These are existing policies that required revision so that they can include updated state codes. The next A&F meeting will take place on Tuesday, November 1st.
Thank you. Any questions? Curriculum.
The Curriculum Committee also met on October 10th. First, the committee reviewed the annual testing report, which was presented at tonight's meeting. A comparison of the 2015 PARC results to 2016 PARC results showed no significant difference except for 11th grade language arts, which Mr. Smith addressed earlier. This is because the 11th grade students enrolled in AP Language and Composition did not take the PARC exam last year, as they did the prior year. The AP results and the SAT results continue to demonstrate high levels of achievement by the students. Next, the committee reviewed the data from this past summer's Option 2 course taking and examined this in relation to 2014 and 2015 data. Since the board implemented changes to the Option 2 policy, the number of students getting a 70 or better on the equivalent WWP exam has more than doubled. The pass rate for 2016 is 63%. The Curriculum Committee recommends approval of the following new curricula. Student Assistance Curriculum, grades 9 through 12. This was an addition of a few lessons in the Student Assistance area. Math Grade 8 RC, which is the same curriculum as the Math Grade 8, just additional annotations were added for students with IEPs. The Curriculum Committee also recommends approval of the following revised curricula. After the first full year of teaching these courses, the teachers who wrote this curricula made some revisions. Chinese Grade 6, Chinese 3, and Chinese 4 honors added more thematic components. Grade 3 through 5 general music and grades 3 through 5 chorus made some minor adjustments based on the experience of the first year of teaching these new curricula. Genetics was aligned to the next generation science standards. The Curriculum Committee also recommends the submission of the West Windsor-Plainsboro Regional School District Board of Education's New Jersey Quality Single Accountability Continuum, which is we call QSAC, the Statement of Insurance for the 2016-17 school year to the New Jersey Department of Education. Next, we supported the recommendation for a professional development consultant in math workshop and guidance counselors to attend the National Conference on College Admissions and Counseling, and for teachers to attend the National Council on Teachers of Mathematics Conference. Finally, the committee recommends the approval of overnight student field trips for Model Congress, Model United Nations, Junior Statesmen of America, Washington Seminar, and for the High School South cheerleaders. The next committee meeting will be on November 2nd.
Any questions? Finance?
Okay, the Finance Committee met on October 13th. The auditors presented the audit for the 2015-16 school year. They indicated that the district is in strong financial condition and received the highest possible audit opinion. His overall observation was that our situation is good and our internal controls are sound. He noted that the auditor noted that the district received the Association of School Business Officials International Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting for its comprehensive annual financial report for the 8th time, and the work product this cycle suggests that we will hopefully earn the award again this year. The board will receive a draft prior to being asked to accept the full report at the November 8th meeting. Mr. McCullen also reviewed the management report on administrative findings. This is based on a series of tests of the district's internal controls. He observed that our internal controls are strong. He noted that there were no findings this year. In his experience, a district generally has 1 or 2 findings. Most districts have 3 or 4, and some have even more. So we did well. The committee reviewed the items on the finance agenda for tonight's meeting and supports them. The committee discussed a variety of budget issues. A positive development is the recent announcement of the January 2017 State Employees Health Benefit Plan premium increase of 8.1%. While well above the level of the 2% tax levy cap, it is lower than feared. It's a good sign. The committee will need to particularly focus in budgets on areas where costs are increasing by over 2%. The committee also will be putting some time into looking into the role of teacher resource specialists in the budgeting process. On to other issues. The return temporarily of Howard Bodine and Jimmy Stives back into the district's facilities maintenance has revealed a number of physical plant deficiencies that have not been dealt with in as timely a manner as we would have desired. So they were going to be addressing those as soon as they can. And that's it. Our next meeting is November 15th.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, that brings us to administration. Can I have a motion on items 1 to 9? Michelle and Rachel. Any questions or comments on the agenda items?
Ms. Juliana?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Weising-Jean?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor-Jean?
Yes.
Ms. Hull?
Yes.
Ms. Kay?
Yes.
Mr. Flaherty?
Yes.
8-0.
Okay. Curriculum, can I have a motion on items 1 to 6 plus the pale green addendum? The YZ and Dana? Any questions on the curriculum items?
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Wysey-Jean?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor-Jean?
Yes.
Ms. Ho?
Yes.
Ms. Juliana?
Yes.
Ms. Cage?
Yes.
Mr. Flares?
Yes.
8-0.
Okay. Finance, can I have a motion on items 1 to 16, right? Yeah, 1 to 16. Taylor and Louisa. Any questions on the finance items?
Mr. Scott? Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Wysey-Jean?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor-Jean?
Yes.
Ms. Ho?
Yes.
Ms. Juliana?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Ms. Cage?
Yes.
Mr. Flares?
Yes.
8-0.
Okay, personnel, we have 2 addendums. I have a motion on items 1 and 2 plus the yellow and green addendum. YZ and Louisa. Any questions on the personnel items?
Mr. Wysey-Jean?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor-Jean?
Yes.
Ms. Ho?
Yes.
Ms. Juliana?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Ms. Cage?
Yes.
Mr. Flares?
Yes.
8-0.
Before we go on, I just want to acknowledge 3 retirements. We have Jeanette Belly, Mrs. Belly from the kindergarten at Town Center is retiring after 15 years with the district. Regina Honery, basic skills teacher at Dutch Neck, is retiring after 18 years. And Judy Staggart, special ed teacher at Community, is retiring after 23 years. I want to thank them for their time with the district, and I wish them good luck in the future. We have a motion for approval of the minutes from the 27th. Scott and Rachel. Any questions on any comments on the minutes? Those in favor of approving say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any liaison reports? Any new business? That brings us to the second opportunity for public comment. Floor is open if anyone wants to make a comment.
Veronica Mina, 41 Galston Drive. One of my friends, he has his daughter in Grover. She's taking honors math, and apparently there's a sub that her name, well, I'm not sure if I can say her name, but her name, this sub has a degree in botany, and the father is having major problems because the sub is teaching, as I said, honors math, and apparently the sub doesn't know how to teach. And I'm going to read exactly what the father wrote to me. It says, hopefully this is the last week. She has a degree in botany, yet she's teaching honor algebra. She puts questions on a test on subject matter that has not been taught, and then when asked about it, she says it is on the test she was provided and she forgot to teach. Asking for help is spending 10 minutes to figure out a problem, then trying to get an explanation. Her study sheet has problems that have been incorrectly solved. I can understand how they cannot have a math teacher or how they cannot get a qualified sub. And obviously, this father is asking for help because it is very frustrating for him. It is frustrating for the daughter. The daughter is a straight A student, and right now, the daughter in honors math is getting B+. It's not that the daughter is not qualified. to be taking the subject. She puts in the time, she puts in the effort, and the father has to sit once a week to try to explain what the teacher or the sub is not explaining. And obviously the fact that the teacher is testing on subject matter that she has not explained, I think that is absolutely unacceptable. Also, I wanted to mention that in addition to what this other taxpayer mentioned regarding the elections, I wanted to point out that board members are entitled to express themselves publicly on any matter, including issues involving the board and the school district. Individual board members cannot, however, express the position of the board except as expressly authorized in accordance with the board policy number 1920. A board member shall not represent her personal opinion as the position of the board and shall include in all formal expression in which her board affiliation is likely to be recognized, such as letters to government officials or newspapers, speeches to organizations, and the like, a statement that the opinions expressed do not necessarily represent those of the board. So basically, once again, if there's any board member that is trying to help any candidate, obviously they have to do it representing themselves and not representing them as a board member. Thank you.
Thank you.
Catherine Foley, 29 Hawthorne Drive. Just wanted to follow up on my comments about the Board of Education election and say a few words about campaign finance. As you probably know, election laws in New Jersey don't require a lot of financial reporting from Board of Education candidates and only in certain circumstances. But in cases in the past when there has been a report of people who have donated, we've seen cases where there are some questionable potential conflicts of interest, such as a teachers union representative, a realtor who would have a vested interest in lots of development in West Windsor and Plainsboro. And I'm sure there are people who might even be interested to know if I donated in a candidate. I have some pretty strong opinions, and I have a pretty clear agenda of what I would like to see happen in the district. It's hard enough to research all the candidates that we have to select from in the different categories. And people don't really honestly have time to look into public records to see what is reported there. And going back to what I was saying before, it's also really hard for, it's very time consuming, and it's hard for citizens to research and familiarize themselves with things like sign ordinances and election law. And also I think our township, they're very busy. To try to enforce this is a pretty overwhelming task as well. So it occurred to me that perhaps the time has come for crowdsourcing the challenge of enforcing election law and demanding transparency from our school board candidates. In the past, I've asked candidates to reveal some basic details about their campaign fundraising, and then I've reported back on it at public meetings. I will do that again this year, but this time the information, along with any public campaign finance records, will be readily accessible on a website that will go live Thursday morning called the WWP Watchdog. The URL is www.watchdog.weebly.com. I have some little slips of paper. If you won't remember it, you can take one of them. The website will also contain information regarding sign rules for Plainsboro and West Windsor, and it will give users access to the New Jersey campaign laws. It will also provide a very easy way to report an illegally placed sign and illegal campaign activities. If a violation is reported to me, I'll contact the candidate and give them 24 hours to correct the issue. But violations on election day are going to be reported, pictures posted in real time. My hope is that it will become a badge of honor to run a simple, inexpensive campaign, and it would be my dream to do away with campaign signs entirely. I'm looking forward to the cleanest election season wrap-up in recent memory, and best of luck to all of you who are running.
Thank you.
Peter Searick, Bradford Lane, Plainsboro. So I'm not picking on you. I'm just asking. So I'm sort of confused. So you're going to
address the board?
Oh, then you're going to address her.
Yeah,
Okay.
she'll be here after.
No, I was just wondering. Is this a? I was just confused by the last statement, so I was just clarification. So there's an official council that's monitors the. Scott's giving me the. All right, I'll talk to Catherine later.
Yeah.
I was just confused. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I just wanted to get more clarification.
Good evening. I'm Richard Kay. I reside at 66 Coneflower Lane. I respect the question that the gentleman asked earlier about the positives of technology and the concern about socially disconnectedness. So I'd like to respond to him and explain to the board what I observe now as a person who's volunteered at Dutch Neck School for 3 or 4 years and is now doing the same at Millstone River. In the morning, I see elementary classrooms absolutely using all the best practices, sitting in a circle, talking to each other, preparing for the day, learning how to communicate with each other. There is social interaction at a very high level. The young people are being taught how to be part of a group, how to give respectful feedback, how to set personal goals, and later in the week look back to see what growth they've made on those accomplishments of reaching that goal. I've seen that in all the grade levels in those elementary schools, and I'm quite impressed by it because of my own experience as an educator. I saw the same when I was a substitute teacher a few years ago at Grover. The level of conversation is active in all of the classrooms. People work together. They support each other. They are given that support by their teachers, and I think it's something that we should celebrate. And while I think the question was valid, I believe it's important to give people feedback to say that what you're hoping is happening at a very high level. Our young people are connected because of the curriculum and the quality of our staff.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I know you want to go home, but I meant to say this. Oh, Thiza Friedman, 4 Woodland Court, West Windsor, and I'm with her. Anyway, so I just want to thank the two of you gentlemen for your reports tonight because it shows several things. Obviously, number one, that our school district is not slipping at all. Our APs, our SATs, and so forth, our testing scores remain extremely high, and our kids are extremely well prepared for leaving West Windsor-Plainsboro and moving on to college. I hear that. I see it in the results, and I hear it from parents of children who have graduated. Also, as far as the HIB goes, I know I should have said it before. I apologize. But I served on the HIB committees in 2 schools for years since its inception, and while we don't want to see any kind of reports for HIB or things we might think are HIB, it is remarkable to me with the number of students we have in our buildings, how few incidents we have. Those graphs look very big. Thank goodness they represent very small numbers. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. I think that will close the public comment. Superintendent would like to make one closing remark.
Just one comment regarding the election to the gentleman's comment. We, as a school district, our goal is not to get involved at all with the election. The only time that we have any engagement with the township clerk is if someone puts signs on school grounds property, and then we just simply make a phone call to the clerk's office, and we ask them to take care of it, and we ask for direction. Sometimes they will tell us, please remove the sign, while the building and ground staff member do that. But as long as it's there, and the other thing is with voting machines on school grounds, there's rules about distance a candidate can be from the voting entrance. And sometimes someone will complain to a building principal or complain to a central administrator that someone is distributing materials within the boundaries. We don't play boundary. We just simply report it to the clerk and ask the clerk to then get involved. So that's the parameters we go by with respect to the school district.
Okay. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Rachel and Scott. Those in favor of adjourning say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all, and remember, our next meeting is going to be at Grover.